At 4:39 p.m. on April 14, 1988, the American frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts was trapped in a lethal web. Floating just beneath the murky surface of the Persian Gulf were rows of Russian-designed M8 naval mines. As the captain carefully ordered the ship to back out of the field, a deafening explosion shattered the keel. A cheap World War I-era antique weapon had just crippled a multi-million-dollar American warship in seconds. 4 days later, the United States Navy would exact a terrifying revenge, erasing half of the Iranian surface fleet in a single workday. The kill chain. Today, we enter the volatile and unforgiving battlefield of Operation Praying Mantis, a clash that forever changed modern naval warfare. To understand how the largest American naval surface engagement since World War II ignited, we must rewind to the brutal climax of the Iran-Iraq War. By 1987, the strategically vital waters of the Persian Gulf had been transformed into a fiery graveyard for commercial merchant shipping. Desperate to choke off each other's economic lifeblood, both Iran and Iraq relentlessly targeted neutral oil tankers in what became grimly known as the Tanker War. In response to this chaos, the United States launched Operation Earnest Will, deploying heavily armed warships to escort reflagged Kuwaiti tankers through the perilous strait. But the mighty United States Navy faced an agonizing strategic dilemma, fighting a phantom enemy that refused to engage in conventional, open-water combat. Instead of deploying their vulnerable frigates, Iranian forces resorted to asymmetric guerrilla tactics, utilizing swarms of speedboats and insidious naval mines. The Russian-designed M8 contact mine was a masterclass in brutal simplicity, a spiked iron sphere packed with over 250 pounds of high explosives. Costing barely $1,500 to produce, these silent killers were indiscriminately dumped into international shipping lanes under the pitch-black cover of darkness. It was an invisible, indiscriminate threat that completely defied the sophisticated multi-million-dollar radar and sonar systems of modern American warships. On the quiet afternoon of April 14th, the USS Samuel B. Roberts was steaming toward a routine refueling rendezvous in the central Persian Gulf. Suddenly, tense lookouts spotted the unmistakable, rusted horns of 3 contact mines bobbing in the water, lying directly perpendicular to the ship's course. Commander Paul X. Wren immediately ordered the engines to all back full, attempting to meticulously retrace the frigate's exact wake to escape the deadly trap. For 20 agonizing minutes, the crew held their collective breath as the heavy warship slowly reversed through the narrow, invisible corridor of safety. But lurking just below the waterline, entirely hidden from the desperate eyes of the lookouts, was a fourth, deeper mine waiting in the shadows. At 4:53 p.m., the Roberts accidentally backed directly into the submerged explosive, triggering a catastrophic detonation that ripped through the steel hull. The sheer force of the blast generated a massive gas bubble that violently lifted the entire 4,000-ton warship completely out of the water. The ship's steel keel, the very structural spine of the vessel, failed instantly, curling away like a broken pipe cleaner under the immense kinetic shock. A searing fireball burst upward through the exhaust stack, engulfing 4 separate decks in flames as a 20-foot crater opened in the lower hull. Within 90 seconds, 1,800 tons of dark, oily seawater surged into the main engine room, threatening to drag the crippled frigate to the bottom. What followed was a textbook desperate display of naval damage control, as sailors frantically stuffed mattresses and clothing into shattered bulkheads to stem the flooding. Against all logical odds, the crew's heroic 5-hour struggle saved the Roberts from sinking, leaving the vessel a burned-out, floating wreck. In the tense days that followed, Navy explosive ordnance disposal teams recovered the unexploded mines nearby, making a damning, undeniable discovery. A 2016 declassified CIA report revealed that American intelligence had already tracked Iranian command and control networks, and the matching serial numbers provided the undeniable proof. There was no more ambiguity. Washington had its smoking gun, and President Reagan authorized a devastating retaliation that would fundamentally alter naval combat forever. In the Pentagon, military planners were tasked with designing a response that was severe enough to deter future mining, yet calibrated to avoid a full-scale regional war. The concept was framed as a proportional response. But in the unforgiving mathematics of naval warfare, proportionality was about to take on a terrifying new meaning. The targets selected were not traditional military bases, but rather heavily fortified offshore oil platforms, the Sasson and the Siri. These platforms had ceased pumping oil years ago. Instead, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard had converted them into forward staging bases, bristling with radar and anti-aircraft guns. From these rusted iron islands, Iranian forces coordinated their devastating hit-and-run speedboat attacks and monitored every movement of the American fleet. To dismantle this network, the United States assembled a formidable armada, dividing its warships into 3 highly specialized surface action groups: Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. High above the Gulf, providing an impenetrable umbrella of air cover, was Carrier Air Wing 11, launching continuously from the nuclear-powered USS Enterprise. The operation, codenamed Praying Mantis, was meticulously designed to strike with overwhelming, synchronized violence at the break of dawn. On April 18, 1988, at 8:00 a.m., Surface Action Group Bravo materialized out of the morning haze, surrounding the heavily armed Sasson platform. Over the maritime radio, a calm but chilling message from the American commander echoed across the water. "You have 5 minutes to abandon the platform. We intend to destroy it." On the Sasson, panic erupted. Iranian personnel scrambled to man their 23mm cannons, while others desperately piled into small escape boats. As the 5-minute deadline expired, the Iranian gunners made a fatal miscalculation. They opened fire on the circling American warships. The American response was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The destroyers USS Merrill and Lind McCormick unleashed a devastating barrage of 5-inch naval gunfire. Hundreds of high-explosive shells slammed into the Sasson platform, tearing through steel bulkheads and igniting stored ammunition in a chain of secondary explosions. As the Iranian resistance melted away in the inferno, AH-1 Cobra helicopter gunships swept in, silencing the remaining strongholds with TOW missiles. Through the thick, acrid smoke, elite United States Marines fast-roped onto the burning, twisted wreckage of the Sasson. Their mission was twofold: gather any surviving intelligence materials and rig what was left of the structure with hundreds of pounds of C4 plastic explosives. The Marines uncovered a treasure trove of operational documents and cryptographic equipment, confirming the platform's role as a terror command center. With the intel secured, the Marines evacuated. Moments later, The detonation charges ripped the assassin's legs out from under it, sending the smoking ruin crashing into the Gulf. Simultaneously, 40 miles to the southeast, Surface Action Group Charlie had surrounded the Siri oil platform. The cruiser USS Wainwright broadcasted the exact same 5-minute warning, but the defenders of the Siri platform chose a different path. Instead of abandoning their posts, Iranian gunners defiantly aimed their Zu-23 anti-aircraft cannons and opened fire on the heavily armored American cruiser. It was an act of tactical suicide. The Wainwright and the frigate USS Bagley answered the provocation by unleashing hell on Earth. In addition to naval gunfire, the American ships fired an AGM-84 Harpoon missile directly into the heart of the Siri platform's superstructure. The resulting explosion was so violent and absolute that the planned Marine boarding party was canceled. There was simply nothing left to board. By mid-morning, the United States had systematically dismantled the Iranian forward operating bases, expecting the hostile forces to stand down. But in Tehran, the leadership viewed the destruction of their platforms not as a proportional punishment, but as an act of full-scale war. Refusing to yield, Iran unleashed its terrifying asymmetric swarm. Dozens of heavily armed Boghammer speedboats poured out from coastal hideouts into the Persian Gulf. Unable to directly challenge the armored American warships, the Iranian speedboats took out their rage on soft, civilian targets, indiscriminately attacking a Panamanian cargo ship and a British tanker. The conflict had instantly escalated out of control. The proportional response had failed. The true bloodbath of Operation Praying Mantis was only just beginning. When frantic, static-filled distress calls from the burning civilian ships reached the American command, the parameters of the operation instantly shifted. This was no longer a contained, surgical strike against isolated military outposts. It had become a chaotic, open-water brawl for absolute control of the Persian Gulf. High above the sprawling maritime battlefield, the USS Enterprise immediately diverted 2 heavily armed A-60 intruder attack aircraft to hunt the fleeing speedboat swarm. These all-weather bombers dropped through the low cloud ceiling, skimming just above the whitecaps like predatory birds searching for their prey. The intruders visually acquired the Iranian Boghammers, which were still mercilessly raking a crippled Panamanian commercial vessel with heavy machine gun fire. Without hesitation, the American pilots engaged, unleashing a devastating payload of rockeye cluster munitions directly over the concentrated swarm. The sheer density of the cluster bomblets shredded the fiberglass hulls. One speedboat was instantly obliterated, while the terrified survivors rapidly fled toward the sanctuary of Abu Musa Island. It was the first time American aircraft had directly engaged Iranian surface forces, but the regular Iranian Navy, deeply insulted, was about to make a fatal entrance. Departing from its naval base, the Iranian fast attack craft Joshin, a French-built missile boat, steamed directly toward Surface Action Group Charlie. The Joshin's commander was determined to avenge the destroyed oil platforms, willfully ignoring the massive technological disparity between his small boat and 3 American warships. Aboard the cruiser USS Wainwright, radar operators watched in disbelief as the single, solitary Iranian vessel closed the distance with brazen aggression. Captain James Chandler of the Wainwright repeatedly broadcasted standard maritime warnings: "Stop your approach. Alter course immediately." The Joshin responded with silence. The missile boat closed to a terrifyingly short 13 miles, absolute point-blank range for modern naval combat. Suddenly, the Wainwright's electronic warfare sensors screamed. The Joshin had just locked its targeting radar directly onto the American cruiser. Realizing a strike was imminent, Captain Chandler transmitted a final, chilling ultimatum. "Stop your engines and abandon ship. I intend to sink you." The Iranian captain's answer was an immediate, suicidal order to fire. In a bitter stroke of historical irony, a U.S.-made Harpoon anti-ship missile, sold to Iran before the 1979 revolution, erupted from the Joshin's launch tube. The heavy warhead dropped to just feet above the churning waves, screaming toward the American cruiser at a blistering Mach .8. Aboard the Wainwright and the nearby USS Simpson, General Quarters' alarms blared. The crews had a mere matter of seconds to react to the incoming threat. The American warships instantly initiated aggressive evasive maneuvers, violently turning their massive hulls while firing thick clouds of radar-reflecting metallic chaff into the sky. The electronic countermeasures worked. Seduced by the chaff, the Iranian Harpoon missile veered slightly off course, missing the Wainwright's starboard side by a mere 100 feet. The American retaliation was instantaneous and terrifying. The frigate USS Simpson had already locked its fire control radar onto the brazen Iranian attacker. Exactly 3 seconds after the Iranian launch, the Simpson fired a salvo of 4 Standard missiles, utilizing them in a brutal surface-to-surface mode. The cruiser Wainwright immediately followed suit, launching its own barrage of missiles to ensure absolute, overwhelming annihilation. Lacking any advanced anti-missile defense systems, the crew of the Joshin could only watch helplessly as the supersonic American weapons streaked across the sky. The American missiles slammed into the Joshin in rapid, devastating succession, ripping the superstructure completely off the deck and detonating its remaining ordnance. The proud fast attack craft was instantly crippled, transformed into a violently burning, dead-in-the-water tomb of twisted metal. But the U.S. Navy was taking no chances. The surface ships aggressively closed the distance, firing their 5-inch guns to ensure the threat went straight to the bottom. Slowly, the shattered remains of the Joshin slipped beneath the dark waves of the Persian Gulf, taking its defiant captain and crew down with it. Yet, despite the total loss of the Joshin and the decimation of their speedboats, the Iranian High Command prepared to make one final, catastrophic gamble. From the naval base at Bandar Abbas, the Iranian frigate Sahand slipped its moorings and steamed aggressively into the open Gulf. Unlike the small speedboats, the Sahand was a formidable, modern warship, bristling with anti-aircraft artillery and surface-to-air missiles. Its commander soon spotted 2 American A-6 intruders circling high above, monitoring the smoking ruins of the oil platforms. Without warning, the Sahand locked its fire control radar onto the American bombers and unleashed a barrage of anti-aircraft fire. The intruders violently broke formation, diving toward the deck to evade the deadly flak and shoulder-launched SAMs streaking past their canopies. The American pilots were cleared to engage. They immediately climbed back into attack position, bringing their advanced targeting pods online. The intruders unleashed a devastating combination of Harpoon anti-ship missiles and Skipper laser-guided bombs, swarming the frigate from multiple vectors. There is no cover on the open ocean. The Sahand sailed directly into a wall of unavoidable American air power. 2 Harpoon missiles slammed into the frigate's hull, ripping through the steel armor and detonating deep within the ship's magazines. Seconds later, the laser-guided bombs struck the superstructure. A massive firestorm erupted, instantly blinding the bridge and disabling the engines. From over the horizon, the destroyer USS Joseph Strauss fired a final harpoon, delivering the coup de grace to the burning wreck. Completely gutted by fire, the Sahand capsized. Her magazines cooked off in one final, deafening blast as she sank into the deep. But the bloodshed wasn't over. As the Sahand sank, its sister ship, the Sabalan, raced out to join the massacre. The Sabalan was notorious. Its captain was infamous for brutally machine-gunning the helpless crews of unarmed civilian tankers. Arriving on the scene, the Sabalan immediately fired a surface-to-air missile at another flight of American A-6 intruders. The American pilot, Commander James Engler, violently evaded the missile. Then, he rolled his intruder inverted, diving directly at the Iranian warship. With surgical, cold-blooded precision, Engler released a single, 500-pound laser-guided bomb. The bomb plummeted with terrifying accuracy, dropping straight down the Sabalan's smokestack. It detonated deep inside the engineering spaces. The immense internal pressure shattered the ship's spine, instantly paralyzing the vessel. The Sabalan went completely dead in the water, bleeding heavy oil and smoke into the Gulf, its crew abandoning their posts. Commander Engler circled above, locking onto the crippled frigate for the final kill. The rest of the American surface fleet moved in to finish the slaughter. But thousands of miles away in Washington, a secure phone line rang. The Pentagon realized the geopolitical implications of completely annihilating the Iranian Navy. The order crackled over the radio to the American fleet, "Hold fire. We've shed enough blood today." The crippled Sabalan was left to burn, eventually towed away by Iranian tugs, a humiliating, floating monument to American naval supremacy. As the sun set over the Persian Gulf, the fires on the oil platforms and sinking ships painted the horizon in hues of violent orange and black. In a single, 8-hour workday, the United States Navy had effectively erased half of Iran's operational surface fleet. The Iranian Navy would never directly challenge American warships in open water again, pivoting entirely to the shadows of asymmetric warfare. Operation Praying Mantis established the terrifying blueprint for modern, missile-age naval combat, where engagements are decided in seconds, not hours. Yet the chilling paradox of the tanker war remains forever etched in naval history. The world's most sophisticated, multi-million-dollar technological armada was brought to the brink of catastrophe by a rusty, $1,500 iron sphere.